Ladies and gentlemen, this is UX and this is Germany Could Not Win World War II Part 2 by the channel Potential History. A follow-up to my previous video on how Germany could not win the Second World War. People said in the comments that this video wasn't planned, but he made it because all the people in the comment was still arguing things about him, like how Germany could have won. Yeah, to me, Germany winning even with everything aligned towards them is still a far-fetched thing just because they're one nation at the center of the Europe trying to attack all sides. It's never going to work. So let's watch this one. Let's see what this is. A 14-minute video. It's even bigger than his original one. So I guess there are many topics people raise. I guess he's going to talk about here. It's going to be fun. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe. Check out the reaction. There's a link in the description. Check out the cast over playlist. Check out the link cards. And yeah, let's watch it. Oh, Medal of Honor. Oh, I used to play that game a lot.
Excellent work with the German Miss, pal. Here's to hoping better sources will be used in the future. However, our intel has picked up reports of continued resistance in the comment sections. Mentions of Dunkirk and who not to invade seem widespread. We will be dropping you directly into the comment section with your primary objective being to root out these myths. Be cautious, though. Reports indicate that the Wehrabus will be armed with Cold War-era memoirs and David Irving books. Godspeed, Lieutenant.
What the hell? Oh, he made it custom. Look at it. This is the entire letter. Most people probably just glide past that, doesn't even read it. Damn.
This video is brought to you by Dashlane. Stay secure online and never forget a password again. More on that later. So you may recall around 6 months ago, I made a video about how due to Germany's lacking in the population, industrial, and raw materials sectors, they could not have pulled out a victory in the war they started in 1939. And it sorta got out of hand.
I think we should read the comments.
The other day, as I was reading the comment section there, I found that, along with some people agreeing with me, there were a lot of dissenting opinions of yet more ways that people thought the final victory could be achieved. And I am here today to respond to them, and also probably clear up what I meant at the end of the last video talking about limited use of alternative history. Here are a few more ways Germany could not have won World War II. One thing I have seen brought up a few times is that if Hitler had not—
What was that?
One thing I have seen brought up a few times is that if Hitler had not let the British Expeditionary Force get away at Dunkirk, that later the troops could not be used during Operation Overlord and thus no Western Front, with the implication that the German—
Wait a minute, I don't think Dunkirk had that many soldiers. It was few 100,000, right? I mean, yeah, that is a good enough number, but that's not the war-changing numbers, if I remember correctly.
Troops could have been sent east to stop the Soviets. This, however, has two problems. Firstly, the BEF was not simply allowed to leave France as this narrative suggests. In Mein Kampf, Hitler does speak highly of the British at times and suggests that they could be a potential ally, but this is clearly without a strong grasp of British culture and political policy, and was always discussed with Germany being above Britain and having them be administrators of the Reich, but only if they could shake their, quote, Jewish influence. Furthermore, he realized that Britain was against his intentions in the East and would become a barrier there. All this being said, by the time of the invasion of France, Britain was definitely an enemy, and Hitler was doing them no favors. So then—
Yeah, first of all, Germany sharing power and being ally of Britain just feels just no, right? I don't think Hitler would have ever done that. Sharing things is not Hitler's part, I guess. And also Britain, basically, oh, there is Hitler, there's Nazis, I guess we can just basically co-rule the Europe or whatever, we two biggest power. Obviously implied that if British goes with the Nazis, Russia and Soviet Union falls. Yeah, Britain is not doing that either, right? I mean, there is no scenario where I can think Britain's like, okay, I guess we're with the Nazis. And Nazis like, okay, we'll let the British go because they're allied. That is not happening, ever.
Then why Dunkirk? Well, this was an operational failing, not a peaceful gesture. On May 15, 1940, the Germans broke through the French 2nd and 9th armies and steamed ahead night and day, thanks in part to some tablet boys, towards the coast.
What was the heroin or cocaine? What was that? In the World War II they used that.
Good for the Germans, the mechanized forces were quickly running out of supplies and were leaving their flanks exposed, which opened them to being cut off, the result of which could cause ruin for the German plans. It is at this point a nervous Hitler, being counseled by Generals von Kluge and von Rundstedt, gave a halt order to secure the flanks and allow the exhausted panzer divisions to refit. Check out this video by Mark Gurges for more. Upon the halt, our favorite drug-addled flyboy Goering promised the Luftwaffe could destroy the British at Dunkirk, and although he failed, I would hardly call the actions of the Luftwaffe just letting the British go. With thousands being killed, over 200 ships being sunk, over 100 planes shot down, and the loss of all the BEF's equipment, Hitler even realized that the halt was an error and resumed the attack while the evacuation was underway, and it was only successful due to the brave French soldiers that held out until it was complete. But even if he had let them go, there are still more problems asserting that this means a German victory in the war.
Yeah, first of all, there's no way, Hitler let them go in any means. It was really bloody all around, right? And Hitler basically, obviously, let the Panzer Division said to, halt because they were clearly just speeding. They just were running towards them. Obviously, this opens up a flank, like he said. I mean, you can't, one division cannot just run like it's like, to take a lots of drugs and just run like hell, running all the way to Britain, I guess. That's not going to work, right? All sides have to move forward, otherwise the flank is open, everybody can trap you.
Britain had to rearm all the soldiers evacuated, which is a huge loss and took some time. This force, when returned to England, was not in any way ready to turn around and invade France, although the troop reserves were good to have if Germany decided to invade. But they were not in fighting condition for a long time. But most importantly, Britain is not the only nation present at D-Day. A combined landing force of American, British, and Canadian forces, along with smaller groups from other countries, landed and fought on the Western Front. Although the troop loss, if Dunkirk had failed, may have limited Britain's number of troops, the United States, having only mobilized about 9% of its population in the course of the war, could have very realistically filled in the gaps as it did in reality with the British equipment losses. But all of this still doesn't take into account where the real war is being fought, in the East. The German army will be decidedly on its back foot after Kursk, and the Soviets have massive offensives planned in 1944 regardless of what the Western Allies do. Would the defeat of Germany have taken longer without the Western Front opening? Of course it would. But by 1944, the Soviets have a decisive upper hand and will push the Germans back to Berlin. So to say the war could have been shifted if the British had 300,000 fewer troops ignores the reality of what the Germans were truly up against by 1944.
At the scale they were fighting wars from all sides, 300,000 soldiers would have been a great loss and strategic loss at certain points. Probably would have gained some time. The Nazis would have gained some time somewhere. This is not enough for Germany to win, basically. See, Hitler lost from the start the way he started the war, from the invasion of Poland, right? First of all, Germany is at the center. There is Soviet Union at side, and UK, France, and obviously US in the distance is in the middle of things. Look, only way I can see Hitler having some chance of winning is him being a bit political, right? A bit strategic at the start of the war. He doesn't just point blank start the war and invades Poland. He doesn't do that, but slowly takes over territories here and there in Africa or whatever, to make sure he has proper resources than he had at the time, right? He expands his German empire slowly without, suddenly opening wars like everybody, panicking everybody. He slowly takes over places and then he suddenly attacks Poland and every place with having 3 times as resources than they had. Then I can see somewhat he has a chance. But even then, look, here's the thing. Britain is not easy to just take over, right? It's an island. And British Navy is just like, you can't just walk up to Britain and just occupy it like they did the France. So that wasn't happening. So if you leave Britain out, eventually they would attack Soviet Union because, how we saw in the Hitler video from Oversimplified, communism was opposite of Nazism, right? When Hitler was rising, rising through the ranks, there was 2 divide in the German population. Far left, which was communism, far right, which was Nazism. So it was kind of opposite of what Nazis were. So, I don't see ever, communism and, Soviet Union and Hitler Nazi basically working together just for the long distance. No, Hitler would have attacked communism always, right? They blame communism and Jews for all the problems. So Hitler, just to appease the German people, because what ideas he pushed through, like how his fault of communism and Jews, he was going to attack Soviet Union regardless. So if he attacks Soviet Union without taking down Britain, which he can't do, like I said, it's not easy. So he had both sides to fight anyhow, right? If he attacks Britain, there is United States. Like United States will be there to be as Britain's ally, because they can't let Britain fall down like that. So Britain and United States is always there. So if he attacks Britain, United States will be there, and he has a massive, attack in front of him. He attacks Soviet Union. Britain and United States would join like they did, because this is becoming too much. If Nazis take over Soviet Union, it's way too big of a threat afterwards. They can't let that happen. So Normandy was inevitable, right? It doesn't matter which strategy Hitler chooses. The way he started war, the Germany being center of the Europe like that, fighting from all fronts, no way he could have won, right? World War II was doomed for the Nazis to begin with.
This is another one I saw a lot. Just don't invade the Soviet Union, or just don't declare war on the United States. And although these comments are puzzling on the surface, as removing a major combatant redefines what the war is, and you are now describing how to win a smaller conflict, there are reasons this doesn't work that are all to do with character motivation and why these things were going to happen unless you fundamentally change who the Germans and Hitler were, and then stray into fiction. Let's first start with the Soviet Union. If you read Mein Kampf, don't do it, it's not a very good book, or listen to a lot of Hitler's speeches, both in public and in private, he fixates on this idea of Judeo-Bolshevism, which is a rather outdated term that grew out of the idea of a Jewish conspiracy that had created communism, and the two were the biggest evils facing the Aryan.
There you go. We saw that in Oversimplified video that just, uploaded just 2 hours ago. So no way he was gonna go with communism. He was literally fighting that. That was the Nazism idea at the time.
Nation. There's a whole rabbit hole to go down here with multiple theorists and their ideas, but I'm not gonna go into it here. But that's the basic idea, and Hitler subscribed to it. And the result of this is Hitler's main goal being to destroy the Soviet Union and become the savior of the Aryan people in his eyes, and in the process, wiping out millions of subhuman Slavs and resettle the land with Germans. Hitler saw this as his destiny, meaning he was going to do it at some point, and that this fictitious Hitler that would win World War II by not invading the East is just that, fiction. He ceases becoming the Hitler that we know and that existed, and now we're talking about a made-up story. Now, as to why the Soviet Union was invaded...
This is not just some emperor who wants to take territory, right? This is the guy with certain ideology that he pushed throughout the German people, which he was going to follow through. Not doing certain things implies that he just basically gives up on who he is and from which idea he rose up. That's not going to happen.
When it comes down to two things: resources and, frankly, paranoia. Germany, as I outlined in my previous video on this, spent a lot of the war with fairly limited oil resources, and knew that it couldn't support this attack any later than June of 41 with all the fuel that the battle over Britain was consuming. And even the trade with the Soviet Union would not make up for this deficit. So the High Command felt they had to go in when they did before the army would not be able to move as they needed to finish the campaign by September, the time in which the High Command figured the Soviet Union would collapse in on itself under the weight of the German attack. And I'll point you to David Stahill again for more information on that. The other aspect was, as I said, paranoia. I've often seen this assertion stated in a different way of don't break the alliance with the Soviet Union, although I wouldn't even frame the German-Soviet non-aggression pact as an alliance in the way you think of with the Axis and allies. The treaty was much more in the vein of you don't get in our way, we won't get in your way, let's trade some stuff. And it was very...
It was an alliance, it was a temporary thing that let's not kill each other right now. That was it was a delayed thing.
Easy at many points before and during its existence, becoming most volatile during combat between German and Soviet soldiers during the Poland campaign, after the Germans overran the territory that was designated as theirs and moved into territory promised to the Soviets that actually contained oil fields, making it not very subtle what the Germans were trying to do. Both Stalin and Hitler knew that some form of war was coming, just not when and who would start it, but going out of their way for the most part to not provoke it, and they didn't trust each other whatsoever. Now, I'm not implying any kind of Suvorov preventative...
I'm not gonna lie, that clip right there about Stalin is just very damn creepy because how bad quality of the video it was from the time, obviously. Look at that. It's just creepy as hell.
And they didn't trust each other whatsoever. Now, I'm not implying any kind of Suvorov preventative war type thing. The Soviet Union was refitting and probably wouldn't be ready for a large war until at least mid-1942, but with these two ideologically opposing powers taking territory so quickly right next to each other, it was something that was bound to happen as soon as one of them felt they were in a position to make the first move. By 1941, the Germans felt they were, and they took the opportunity. For more on this, and the German-Soviet clashings in Poland, I'll point you towards Stephen Kotkin's second book in his Stalin series, or this video of him talking about it. The declaration of war on the US is...
I love all the people in the comments that, criticize lots of things that he said, are just saying things what they're feeling. while this guy, the guy from Potential History, actually reads book that people, smart people, historian wrote, and he actually, reads all that book, and from there he comes to this conclusion. But people in the comments just saying what they're feeling. This is the battle right now.
Is a bit more tricky, especially given that Hitler was aware of the industrial capacity of the nation. However, he saw the US as very internally focused and figured that it would take them much longer to mobilize than it did. Hitler always planned for war with the United States, as outlined in his second book, written but not published, in 1928, but wanted to put it off until he was ready, often skipping on details about how it would be done. He began—
Look, United States during the World War II was not the same United States that was during the World War I. After World War I, US bolstered up lots of things, right? During the World War II, United States was not as it is today, the military part that we know of today. If, today Hitler rises up and all this happens, the battle finishes pretty damn quickly because of how US is today, right? But then again, World War II basically helped US's economy in that sense. But the point is, during the World War II, US's economy was great even before World War I, right? They were really in strategic place and all the resources they had. Their economy was already great. When it comes to military, they were not that powerful during the World War I. But during the after World War I finishes, they realized that how, there could be a global war like that and we could be screwed basically. So they really bolstered up their military and everything. During the World War II, they were no joke, right? So, after all are defeated, after Russia, Soviet Union is defeated, Britain, I don't see it how, because as soon as the attack on Britain starts, United States will claim that it's attack on them. Because after Soviet Union falls, if only Britain is left, United States will basically panic, like we are the only one left afterwards. So US would not let Britain fall, right? So US and Britain would have always attacked together. So I don't see Nazi winning even there, even if it's only Britain and United States left. I mean, it would be immense battle, immense war, pretty damn bloody war than it already was. It would be ridiculous scales, but I still see Nazis losing.
Began to assume that, due to some anti-German sentiments from Roosevelt, the Americans would declare war in 1942, coming to the aid of the Allies like they did in World War I. Piggybacking off the previous statements about the Soviets, he figured he could end the war in the East and turn and fight the West. This feeling ended, though, as the Soviet campaign continued to drag on and 1942 loomed. The German Navy had been—
Well, that is Napoleon or Hitler. Yeah, I think I'm going to be quick in the East, then I'll begin attacking West. Soviet Union and Russia will fall like that. Yeah, sure.
asking for war with the United States for some time, as Hitler had been holding them back to not provoke them, knowing that going against the US Navy, the Kriegsmarine would come up lacking. Hitler's solution to this was Japan, which had a large navy that he thought could tie up the Americans until he was done in Russia, then turn westward and save his plan. He constantly reassured the Japanese that Germany would throw in with them if they expanded their territory south into US-held islands. This was among many attempts to get Germany and Japan to fight the same enemy, which also included trying to get Japan to invade the Soviet Union from the east in June. Although Japan kept Hitler in the dark as to when they were going to attack, Hitler was very pleased when they did and immediately lifted all restrictions on his navy to attack US ships, and later declared war a few days later after his foreign minister, Joachim von Ribbentrop, said, "A great power does not allow itself to be declared war upon, it declares war on others." Now, this decision may have been flawed with the hindsight of putting too much faith in the Japanese Navy and underestimating the US's ability to fight on two fronts and mobilize so quickly, but knowing that Hitler did plan to fight the US way back in the 20s, the timing may be bad given what we know now, but it was not something that he was just not going to do, in the same way he was not going to just opt out of invading the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
This is the one that I see the most. Take the British out before...
This guy is killing Hitler over and over again with that clip.
This is the one that I see the most. Take the British out before you turn east. As if it was that simple. The Germans tried this. First by attempting to bomb the British into submission, which didn't work, and second by planning the invasion of the British home island in an operation named Sea Lion. This was going to be the amphibious assault that would take Britain out of the war, and plans were drawn up and early preparations were made. But before going through with it, the Germans themselves realized this wasn't going to work and cancelled it. The short answer for why is the Royal Navy and the inability of the Kriegsmarine and Luftwaffe to control the channel. The German Navy would be unable to keep the channel clear of British warships to enable troops and supplies to reach the British coast unless the the Army's landing was on a very narrow front, resulting in less water needing to be covered. Knowing the coast was going to be heavily defended, the Army rejected this plan as they would need a wide landing front so they were not just feeding men into a meat grinder. In short, the Germans did not have the material to carry out a successful landing without it either
There you go. That's the Britain sentence right there. You know, what happened if Germany takes on Britain and try to invade it? Germany sends in soldiers into the meat grinder. That's what that is. Britain being an island, that has been their power for centuries. They are an island, they're a powerful navy, they'll be there ready for it on the beaches, basically. Anybody comes, it's a meat grinder. They would basically crush them. It's not easy to invade Britain. And Britain has been one of the most powerful empires ever before this. Even if they were not that during this point, somebody who was one of the most powerful empire of all time is not just going to fall down, especially when they have this kind of a geographical, edge, basically.
bogging down and being cut off on the ground, or being simply sunk on the way to its destination. In the 70s, the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst wargamed the scenario with conditions favorable to the Germans, and came up with the operation being a total failure. Some commenters have gone as far as to suggest using paratroopers to take the British down, but I think you need to only look as far as Crete and Arnhem to see how badly an unsupported airborne operation can go.
Yeah,
the Germans would
this is not
still
enough.
have to land by sea to resupply them and get relief troops on the ground, and the Royal Navy was too large an obstacle to allow this to happen, even by the Germans' own admission.
Paratrooper works at certain operation if you want it to succeed, sure, but whole invasion, yeah, that doesn't work.
One particular comment out of all of them really stood out to me. It began with, if the Nazis weren't Nazis, they would have won. And I think this really speaks to the core of my point. Alternative history is fun. It makes for good Hoi 4 games. But when really talking about it seriously, it's really hard to come by any academic
Yeah, if Nazis were Nazis, they would have won, right? If Hitler wasn't a Nazi, they would have won. If United States didn't exist, they would have won. If Soviet Union were not there and they were just nomadic people, unorganized, they would have won. Yeah, let's just create more and more scenarios, why not?
conclusions outside of a few days of speculation, because you begin building assumption on assumption on assumption, and before you know it, you have changed the motivations and decision-making patterns of everybody you're talking about, and you are then just writing fan fiction.
This is your brain. This is your brain on
Alternative history.
Would Germany have won World War II if the Nazis weren't in power? Maybe, but it's also equally likely they wouldn't have started the war, or joined the Allies, or anything else. If there's no basis in reality to do with
Look, if Nazis were Nazis, there would have been, basically revolt at certain level, because German people were angry with because of Treaty of Versailles, what was happening. There would have been uprising, revolt, massive issues, and then there would have been some discussion, some more treaties, and there it would have ended. Because of the ideology of Nazi, it was this big of a deal, right? If Nazis were Nazis, there wouldn't have been this large of a war. Maybe some war here and there, but not the World War.
the people you are talking about in your assumption, what's the point? Germany decided to start a war.
It's
that with
Hitler's a-holeness that started the war. Hitler came up with Volkswagen, right? Volkswagen, like, I'm going to give all of my German people a car if they just pitch in certain money every month. Where he never wanted to create a car. He just wanted to use that money to create tanks and airplanes and things like that. That was Hitler's idea, Hitler being an a-hole. Without Hitler and Nazi, that doesn't happen. Resources, where do they get resources after, Treaty of Versailles and everything? Everybody's eyes on the Germany. Hitler was being really a-hole and clever. And Nazi ideology, that what pushed them. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been this large scale of war.
Within a little over 2 years, would see them taking on 3 superpowers at once, with the
Seriously.
resources of most of the world behind them. Add in strategic mistakes and intelligence failures, it paints a very grim picture from the start, regardless of decisions made after the fact. Speaking of intelligence failures, don't let your private information go the way of the German armies. There are plenty of Alan Turings out there looking for information and private data that do not have the same honor and duty to country that the original did. If you're like me, you probably forget and end up reusing your password for the sake of convenience. But when you do that, it's like using the same codebooks over and over. And
Yeah, people, go to dasland.com/potential history and support this channel. This is the best video I've seen about why Germany can never win, because all the videos I've been watching about World War II, if there is one type of thing that I've reacted to and watched in past 1.5 years since my channel started, I had to delete lots of the previous videos, but if one thing I've been reacting to and watching is World War II and history around World War II, right? And even I came to the conclusion, without having, that much detail, that there is no scenario where Germany wins because they were just attacking everybody. It's just, Occam's razor, simplicity. Let's just think without too much complication. Germany was basically fighting every superpower from all sides. That never works. No one in ever history has ever done that and be successful. Great people have seen like this is not going to work, even in the Romans' time, that this is not going to work, and they make treaties here and there to secure one side so they can fight in the other side. You can't fight from all fronts. That never works. Well, that was Germany Could Not Win World War II Part 2 by the channel Potential History. This is great channel. If you want me to react to any other video from this channel, I guess comment down. And yeah, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the reaction. There's a link in the description. Check out the cast playlist I created for all my reaction for different channels and things. Check out the end cards, and yeah, I'll see you next time.